Hi, everyone. This is Melissa Peterson and Mark Chen, and we are going to be starting a podcast series for the North American Simulation and Gaming Association, or NASAGA. And we figured for this first podcast, we would talk about who we are and what NASAGA is, and talk a little bit about play and identity. So, one of the things we wanted to do when we started this is actually talk about the games that we're playing. So, Mark, what games are you playing right now?
I playing a lot of role-playing games, some Legend of Grimrock, and before that, though, I played for like 6 weeks Fallout 4, which came out in the beginning of November, and kind of obsessively been playing it, like embarrassingly a lot.
Awesome. So why don't, now that you've told us what you're playing, why don't you tell us a little about yourself? Well,
Sure. So I'm Mark Chen. I'm newly elected to the board of NASAGA this past year. Cajoled into it a little bit, and basically I am a gamer, obviously, and I teach games and learning. I have a doctorate in education, and I study basically expertise development in gaming practice, gaming culture, that type of thing. So I teach at multiple universities. I do some game design on the side, and I play a lot of games. That's basically it. I used to work for a science museum, and I did game design for them before graduate school.
awesome.
How about you?
So what do you want to know? Do you want to know about games first? I guess so. So lately, what games have I been playing? I've been playing Diablo a lot, which has been an obsession of mine for probably the last 3 years or something like that, because of the replay value. There's a lot of great replay value if you haven't checked it out yet. So I've been playing a lot of Diablo. And I've been playing a bunch of silly games on my iPad as well. I've got this one that I'm currently obsessed with called Shop Heroes, where you run a tiny little shop and make things for adventurers who go out and get you stuff so that you can make more stuff. It's total time waster, but I, for some reason, love running a little shop. So it's kind of nice to have something that doesn't require long swaths of time. And then recently, we just started playing this game called Dead Men Tell No Tales, which is a traditional board game, and it's collaborative. And we played it the other night, and it is very hard, as most collaborative games are. So that was kind of nice too, because it's such a totally different thing. As far as who I am, I'm Melissa Peterson. I am, I guess, the chair emeritus of the board of NASAGA. So I was the board chair last year, and I am a game designer, sort of, a game researcher, sort of. I work with a science museum and do some plot design for them for some of their events that they do with kids and adults. So their overnight program especially, they like to have a plot sort of running through the night. So I do some stuff for them with that. And I'm also sort of kind of starting a teeny tiny game studio, which is at very early stages, so I'm not going to share it yet. But I do a lot of consulting on game design as well. So I've worked with a few companies on alternate reality games, especially. So that's really where my expertise is in creating big storylines and plots for people to play through that also teach them things. So I guess that's pretty much what I do. I teach a little bit. I do some game development teaching at Harrisburg University, or have done in the past anyway. So one of the things that I've found in the past as a board member, and especially as a board member trying to support the social media side of things with NASAGA, is that we often talk to our members, and most of our members don't know what they want out of the year. So that sounds more negative than it is, because everybody has all of these great ideas, and and we would all love for them to happen all the time, of course, because we all love the conference that happens every year. And so this is just another attempt to figure out a way for NASAGA to be online and have interesting content happening. And hopefully, this will allow us to sort of begin a dialogue with our members and have you all tell us what you are interested in having us talk about. Because otherwise, Mark and I can talk all day long about games and things that you might not be interested in. So we would love to get feedback on this at the end. I'll bring that call to action back to your attention at the end as well.
And then we're going to point at the bottom like this, like leave your comments.
Yes, leave comments down here eventually, but not right this second. So that's basically what we're trying to do with this podcast, is talk about topics that are important to NASAGANs and make sure that we are supporting the community as much as possible, because otherwise it will be the Mark and Melissa show, which could be fun too.
I think it would be fun. But I mean, so identity to me is a multi-layered topic. I mean, there's a ton of academic literature on identity, obviously identity in general, within identity in games specifically, and whether it's persistent across games or persistent from games to non-games and all this stuff. And then and there's all these layer type research and all that stuff. But then there's also another layer of the multi-layer thing is what is NASAGA's identity? What's an identity of a group versus individuals? My phone's ringing.
That's a good ringtone.
Okay, so the identity of the meta identity, I guess, of the organization and what that means. But then there's a completely, I guess, more narrow version of that story is what is our, me and you, our identities as people and then as players as well. So, this podcast is going to be 5 hours long.
It could be. One of the things that I think is kind of interesting about this space, and which I think you sort of touched on, is this idea of what identity we bring into something like NASAGA. So you and I clearly identify as gamers. And when I did a similar sort of Twitter chat about this, one of my big questions was, how does being a gamer have an influence on your life? Do you identify as a gamer, first of all? And then how does that have influence on your life? And then for those of us who design games, for people who might not necessarily identify as gamers, how do we encourage people who aren't gamers to take part in something? So it's interesting to me, especially coming out of the museum space, where we talk a lot about personal identity and how people come to museums with different ideas about their identity, and how do we connect with them if they don't identify with whatever it is that we're trying to teach them. So how do we find something for everybody to identify with? And I think, it's something that, of course, we would like everybody to come into this podcast and listen to this podcast and think, yeah, these people really get me. But realistically, are we going to hit everybody? Only, I think, if we try really hard. And even then, so from a museum perspective, we build exhibits for as many people as possible, but at a certain point, there are some people who are not, especially coming from a science museum, there are people who are not going to be able to identify with what we're talking about unless we really make an effort. We have to, though, come up with other ways to engage with people who are not going to necessarily think oh, science museum, that is totally my thing. And I feel like that's something that NASAGA is actually fairly good at, attracting the kind of people who are the intended audience. If that made sense.
Yeah, I think so. That sort of just triggers in my head, just definitional work, and I sort of, I guess because I'm an academic, I love sort of mucking around in definitions sometimes. What is the definition of a gamer? What does the identity mean? What's a definition of taking on an identity? So for me, I sort of follow the Jim G tradition, I guess, where different identities are basically expressed by the practices that you partake in, and you basically have different roles that you take on in the different communities that you participate in, and really your participation and sort of the social I guess appearance and stuff that makes you who you are. So for me, like when I said I do expertise research in games, for me, the definition of an expert is not just someone who like does the stuff that an expert does, but also is recognized by the community as an expert, because it's the community that defines what that expert practice looks like. And so for me, it isn't about like what you know, but more like what you do, right? And then and that those things that you do are the things experts do, which is refined over time and all that stuff. So then the values that get expressed through that, I guess, role play, I guess, if you want to call it, mean a particular thing and all that. So for me, when I say I'm a gamer, it means to me more than just like, oh, I play a lot of video games or I play a lot. It actually means that I see the world in a particular way. Like I like being subversive. I like trying to bend rules. I like trying to push at boundaries and see where the boundaries are, I guess. And I actually kind of feel like that's really akin to scientific practice too, where we're basically pushing at nature and trying to see where the boundaries of nature are. And so to the point where when someone tells me that they're not a gamer, I'm like, really? Like, why wouldn't you be? Are you curious? Aren't this, a mess of things?
I totally get that.
I find it so like empowering to have that mindset.
Yeah, I totally get that. I feel like for me, especially, why I do what I do, I ended up where I am because I wanted to start designing games for a project I was working on, and I was told that designing games is too hard, and I was like, no, we're doing this. So that's so I'm in the same boat. I don't understand when people are like, oh no, I'm not one of those gamer people. I'm fascinated by that because to me, that's such a huge part of my identity. So much so that I have taken this crazy career route that I don't think most people would consider a viable career route because I couldn't fathom not using games all the time.
Yeah.
And not playing games all the time. It's pretty fascinating to me that there are people out there who don't constantly play games. I remember riding the bus when I was very young, and I was bored because it was a long bus ride and it was a school bus and the other kids were all being crazy and I was not involved. And I was playing this game with myself where I was running I had my finger on the window as we drove along next to a sidewalk, and I was trying to jump over all the cracks with my finger. So it was like a jumping game. It was like a video game out the window of my school bus. And I remember doing this, and
it was a side scroller.
And it was totally like fascinating to me that other people don't do those things, because what else do you do when you're bored on the bus? And this was before we all had phones and tablets and things. So there wasn't anything else for me to do. I could have done my homework, but how fun is that? That's not fun at all. So I was busy playing this. I was basically playing Mario Brothers out the window. And that's fascinating to me that other people don't have those moments where they come up with a game to entertain themselves. It's, I don't know, it's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've actually thought about quite a bit is the number of people I know who do not self-identify as gamers, but who still play games. So that's like a whole other section. I could talk about that forever too. My mother-in-law does not identify as a gamer, but she does play games. My mother does identify as a gamer and also plays games as well. But it's kind of interesting to me, the number of people who see gamers as being this very specific subset of people who play things like Halo, people who play things like Diablo, people who play board games, like crazy board games, not Monopoly, but like German board games.
Then is that, if we replace the word gamer with scientists, so there's a bunch of people who don't consider themselves scientists or would
most
never.
People, yeah.
Most people. But is that? I mean, maybe we should blow the definition apart a little bit. Maybe whenever you are engaging in some sort of inquiry, you are a scientist. And whenever you're just like, if you run a taste test on like Dr. Pepper clones, you're doing some science right
Yes.
there, actually. If you,
This is great. I'm glad we're recording this because there are science museums out there who would love people to hear something like this.
right? So
Because
if
you
you
are a
do
scientist.
that, does that automatically make you a gamer? If you conduct scientific stuff, build models, test hypotheses, all this stuff, right? Are you automatically considered a scientist? And I feel like we should try to encourage people to see themselves as able to take on these roles much more readily.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so powerful in terms of learning.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes much more authentic if you believe you are actually doing the things that these people do, right? Because then there's all this projection work that happens, there's all this framing work that happens. It's really, really important
To get us back to Jim G. This is totally all Jim G.
I know. So
Yeah.
it always is strange to me when I hear people, and it's not just gamers, it's like when they say they aren't X,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, well, can't you just sort of shift identities in the moment really easily, because you should be, in order to do the things that you need to do in this moment, like.
Yeah. So kind of funny story about people not identifying as scientists. I work at a science museum part of the time, and I was working an overnight program, and one of the moms came up to one of my coworkers who is about maybe 6 months away from a PhD in biochemistry or something like that. He's a scientist for real. And she said, I need to talk to one of your scientists. And he said, okay, go ahead. And she said, no, a real scientist. And he said, okay, go ahead. And she said, no, like a scientist. And no, he had to convince her that he knew enough science that she could ask the question that she had. And it turned out that the question that she had was about the size of a hummingbird heart or something strange like that. And he is a biochemistry guy, so he knew enough about it to be like, oh yes, that is correct, or whatever it was that she was asking about. But it was really kind of a funny piece of identity thing that she had this image in her head of what a scientist was, and my friend was clearly not it. And so she just kept asking over, no, I want to talk to one of your scientists. Well, of course we have scientists on staff, and pretty much everybody who is in the education department on some level is a scientist. From a societal perspective, we all consider ourselves scientists anyway because we're doing amazing things, experimenting. But it's just such an interesting thing, because I think that there's that societal idea, and then there's personal identity.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't always match up, which maybe is why people don't want to identify as gamers and don't want to identify as scientists, even though they are, because they have the societal idea sitting here, and that's not, they don't see themselves there. They see themselves in this other place that's not, it's the definition thing again.
Maybe we're just too caught up on labels. We live in a bureaucratic society, and we're too caught up on labels, and what we should be focusing on instead is what people do, so like, maybe I'm not a scientist, but I do science, maybe I'm not a gamer, but I definitely game, I engage in gaming practice, and but so then that just raises, like, so how then do we define like what NASAGA is, and how NASAGA is going to move forward, and what kind of identity does NASAGA want to take on? Is it just an amalgamation of what everyone as a member wants or brings to the table? Like, are we just a mishmash of everyone's personal identities or motivations or values or whatever, just sort of stuck in this sort of mix? Or is it something, does it have a sort of entity of its own, or some, some sort of defining thing on its own that individuals then need to decide if they align with,
Right. And so I'm going to answer that. if that's okay. So
Yeah.
to me, or I guess I'm going to tell you my personal idea, and then maybe people will have comments about this. So to me, NASAGA it's kind of both because the people who have stuck with NASAGA since I've been involved, which has been about 5 years now, I want to say that I've been involved with NASAGA. We all are sort of our own mishmash of people. It's not just trainers, it's not just educators, it's not just people doing team building, it's not just people who are making games or simulations. It's not just one thing. We all kind of bring our own things to the table, but I think that the thing that really sort of solidifies NASAGA, for me at least, is that we are all trying to use these things for good. As far as I can tell, I haven't met anybody yet who's doing anything evil with that, but it seems like we all sort of have a common mission of educating and training and helping people be the best that they can be through our efforts. So I don't know if everybody has that same feeling, but just the people who I've met through NASAGA have been like that. And so on some level, even if it's not articulated, and I do think we have a mission statement, which we should probably revisit at some point. But one of the things about NASAGA is just that we're all bringing our own stuff to the table in sort of a common sharing of knowledge for other people doing similar things, though not necessarily the same thing. So to me, I know when I went to my first NASAGA, I came back and I said, this conference was amazing. My boss said, oh, is this something I should go to? And I said, of course. But that I definitely thought that if we had hired any new designers, that they should go, because the amount of knowledge at NASAGA is just intense. and a new designer is going to get so many new ideas and understand so much more about how people learn and how people are learning specifically from games and simulations, that it would be even, I mean, it's already valuable, but it would be even more valuable for somebody who's just starting out.
Yeah. So how does the identity, either of the organization or of yourself, relate to the games that you've been playing?
That's a big question. So that is a really big question. So the games I've been playing, let's revisit Diablo, Shop Heroes, and Dead Men Tell No Tales. Okay, so I do have something. So Dead Men Tell No Tales is a collaborative game, and I have discovered over the course of my whole life, I guess, that I am competitive, but not. I prefer, so I either play solo games for the most part, or I play collaborative games. I'm not as big into any sort of player versus player. I tend to avoid those. Even in games that have it, I don't tend to play on servers that have player versus player. I don't tend to enter those sorts of zones, things like that. I'm pretty comfortable playing solo or with a group of people who all have common goals. So Dead Men Tell No Tales is a board game that we just bought entirely because it was 2-player collaborative, because that way my husband and I can play together, and we have a common goal, because we learned very quickly that if we played the very competitive games together, that we get angry at each other and that's not great. We didn't leave those games feeling great about how we had spent our time. So I've been pushing more into the collaborative board game and trying out more collaborative board games, because that way we can both have fun, because he is way more competitive than I am, and so I'd be having a great time and he would get very intense.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ever play board games with my husband, you will discover this. He is very intense. He's going to win. He's decided. So, so just for our own happiness, we've switched to collaborative games, because that's just, I'm more of that sort of either collaborate or leave me alone. That's the kind of gamer that I am.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
I think so.
It was sort of like off to the side, but
I mean, it started triggering in me. Like I started thinking about player types and motions and things like that. I think what I'm hearing is that your husband is really into, like, he's really into trying to solve the puzzle, I guess. Often a game presents you with some sort of challenge and particular constraints, and you work within those constraints to overcome the challenge. And there's a very sort of like for some people that's the point of playing is
Mm-hmm.
doing that sort of figuring out or rising up, I guess, to the challenge. Um, and then for other people, I mean, there's like the complete opposite extreme, which is for some people, they just like the social experience. They just like hanging out with people, with their friends or strangers that they just like hang out with, right? And so it doesn't matter if they win or lose. It just matters that the quality of the social interaction is really high.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to know people as you're playing the game and everything. And then there's stuff in between and everything. Um, so it's like on the one hand you have like the game, and then on the other hand you have like this sort of like um mishmash definition of what it means to game, I guess. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
um Bernie DeKoven's book, The Well Played Game, sort of touches on this, where you have the game and you can win the game, but then the game is only considered actually well played if everyone who's playing the game actually enjoys it and has sort of has sort of come to an agreement upon how the game should be played and enjoyed and everything. And it turns into a much more sort of inclusive model. Yeah, so that's interesting. I mean, I'm actually very similar. So when I play these role playing games that I've been playing, so like Fallout 4, there's for the most part single player role playing games. And obviously I did a lot of stuff in World of Warcraft. My dissertations on World of Warcraft, and when I played that, I tended to focus on player versus environment stuff. So I did like cooperating and coordinating with other players, but I also just sort of like just doing solo stuff in World of Warcraft as well. And I didn't really enjoy player versus player in that game or in any game. And that's pretty true of like almost everything. Like I like team sports better than individual sports. Um, and I would probably even more enjoy like geocaching or scavenger hunty type of things rather than team versus team
Mm-hmm.
match type of real world games or physical games, I guess. Um, Out in the world games, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And then yeah, Fallout 4. So like for me, it's really about narrative. Um, I really
Yeah.
like not necessarily figuring out the puzzle, but just making meaning, I guess, or having meaningful experiences in games. And to me, that means I like figuring out where the story is going. I like well developed characters, and um, it's like for me like a really good novel when it's over. Um, I really wish it wasn't over because I want to hang out with these characters more,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that's my main motivation. I basically go through like I play games obsessively one after another, um, because I'm basically consuming stories, um, if that makes any sense. So
It does.
in terms of what that means for like how I see myself like in a saga, or how I see myself in my professional role or whatever. Whenever I do game design for a client, or I try to focus on story. It sounds like you too,
Yeah.
and the narrative matters. Trying to get players motivated through uncovering some sort of plot or mystery or some deeper meaning to what's going on and why they should be doing the things that they're doing, or why the game exists as it exists, or the situations exist that they encounter, why those things are the way they are, seem to matter more than like, oh, you just need to do this to get 50 points.
Yeah. Yeah. Rather than just grinding, you need to go catch 500 of these things if it makes sense for the story. That's one thing I want to say briefly before, because we've been talking for a while. that's one of the things about the Fallout franchise that I actually quite like, that it's not just like go kill all these beetles. It's oh well, you know, you need to get to this area and you're going to kill some beetles on your way, kind of thing, or you need to find this guy, or you need to help this guy out, so you need to go talk to everybody and figure out what it is that this guy is looking for, and then go find the thing. And sometimes there's like a whole other quest line there, that a story that you wouldn't have uncovered if you didn't decide to help this guy. So that's kind of nice, especially after playing games like World of Warcraft, where it really is like, you need to collect 50 beetle shells. Well, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And I'm bored after 5
Fallout,
beetle shells.
Fallout 4 has sort of taken a turn towards more, I guess, grindy kill quests.
That's a shame.
Which
I haven't played it yet, so.
But that said, it's still like, obviously to me, a very, very engaging game.
Obviously, because you've been playing it for like 3 months now, 2 months.
Yeah, I think I have 357 hours logged into Steam.
Wow.
Weeks, yeah. Something like that.
So you've been playing pretty consistently. So it can't be that bad of a game, because it held your attention for 357 hours. So if anyone was looking for a review on Fallout 4, Mark can say it is engaging.
So much so that I deleted it last week.
So that you could get work done?
Yeah.
Awesome. So all of that said, I'm just going to sign us off, because we have been talking for a while now, and I feel like we covered a lot of really great topics, and I hope that some of those topics resonate with some of you. And of course, feel free to reach out in the comments section or on Facebook to nasaga.org and ask any questions. Tell us topic ideas that you have, or if you've never heard of NASAGA before, this is the first time you've heard about it, reach out to one of us and we'll talk to you all about it, probably talk your ear off about how awesome it is. And of course, the conference is in Bloomington, Indiana this October, and it is going to be amazing. So feel free to reach out. We are all very approachable, so don't feel like you need to go through some formal channels or anything like that. Just ask us questions on Facebook or YouTube or whatever. So if you have any topics, make sure to send those along. And otherwise, we're going to do the Mark and Melissa show. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Bye.